Ever wondered what it takes to run a one-man mechanic business in some of Canada's most rugged landscapes? On today's episode of Tekamo Podcast, we chat with Tyler from Alberta, a mechanic with over a decade of experience. Tyler worked everywhere from mine sites to the far reaches of northern BC. He shares stories of building his business, the value of trust in his industry, and why being his own boss keeps him on the road. Let's get right into it. Tyler.
Hey, Kevin, how's it going today?
Good, how are you? You're a busy guy.
I am. Yeah. Super busy. I had the truck down for a few days, so this is a good time. Good time to have a chat, I guess.
Where is most of your work done?
Oh, man. Like these days, most of my work is done everywhere. I got one really good customer that I spend a lot of time catering to, I guess you could say. They're very mobile. They're in the aggregate business and they move around the entire province of Alberta and northern BC. So I'll go, I guess within the last year, I've been everywhere from Fort Nelson, BC to Sightsee Dam, Chetwynd, all the way down to Tabor and Lethbridge area and everywhere in between, Grand Cache, Grand Prairie, White Court, Smoky Lake. You probably wouldn't know where that is, but it's a little more on the northeast corner. Yeah, it's pretty much somebody needs a pit and they need X amount of gravel crushed, and these fellas roll in and do their thing for however long it takes. And as things break down at the site, then I go and fix it.
Cool. So wherever the work is, that's where you go.
Yeah.
How many trucks do you have?
I currently own, I guess you could say, 3 trucks right now. I got one spare. I got my personal truck, and then I have an employee that's got another contract of mine. He's fulfilling some obligations out in Eastern Slopes, like Hinton area, for some coal mining customers of mine.
How did your fleet size change over the past few years?
Well, I was all by myself, and it took a little while to get started. But then once I got a little more established, I had some pretty, really consistent work with some big clients. And I had one customer that approached me. They were kind of, I wouldn't say having issues, but they kind of wanted to get away maybe from having they wanted dealer support, but they didn't want surge labor, I guess you could say. So they didn't want dealer guys that would just show up and do work and leave. And I guess sometimes they'd have to chase that work or find out what was done. And it was just, I don't know. They approached me, asked me if I could supply them with more trucks. At that time, I had bought a 4th truck just because it was too good of a deal to pass up. I bought my first truck, my first extra truck, I guess you could say. So my second truck, I bought that to try and help them out. I hired a guy. It didn't work out at all. It was horrible. It was the worst experience in the world. I changed the way that I did things after that. After I was approached later to supply more trucks than just the one, I changed my approach to instead of having employees, I subcontract everything now. It's just way easier on my end. I ended up buying this 4th truck just because it was a good deal. So I found a couple guys to run my original truck, plus the second truck, I guess you could say. This is getting confusing, and the 4th truck that I bought. So I had 3 more guys. I put them out at that customer, and then they had some management rearrangement. That kind of fell through. I had one guy leave, started his own truck. I wasn't going to hold anybody back. Good for him. He's doing pretty good, I think. And then another gentleman just he didn't like the atmosphere, I guess, that was going on at the time that they were rearranging things. So he wanted to be closer to home. He left, and I still have the 3rd guy. He's doing great for me. He's been wicked. So
it sounds like you grew pretty quickly at that time.
Yeah, it was almost like overnight. It was within 6 months that I went from just me and another guy that wasn't really working out to having 3 really good guys plus myself. That all happened within 2 months, where I just hired just 3 guys, put them all to work. And yeah, I was kind of considering just getting out of that when they approached me. And then I said, well, I guess I got the trucks. I'll try it out. And now it's on the downturn. I'm kind of shying away from that. I'd rather maybe just go back to myself and maybe one other reliable person. It's tough to manage everything else, plus still be wrenching lots of times with no service. They got, this guy doesn't show up. I don't know, we need more guys, or when are you getting this guy? How long are we getting him for? Just all the management details and everything. I'm trying to deal with that stuff at 7, 8 o'clock in a hotel, and I'm someplace completely different. It's just a little easier just having maybe one guy that's reliable, kind of takes care of his own thing, and plus myself. If I was to do multiple trucks for the rest of my, I guess, owning a business, I would probably think about just dropping right off the tools and just buying like four more trucks. Like everybody goes through that kind of revolving door thing until they find some decent guys that they can hold on to, treat them really good, try and train them, whatever you got to do to hold on to those guys. I'd have to do that. Just step back from wrenching and manage customers and techs, but I'm not really into that. So I still like wrenching. I still like traveling around. So I'm not really ready for jumping in with 10 trucks or whatever.
So you said that you at some point decided to go from employee to contractor, but still providing the truck. Is that correct?
Yes, because okay, my first guy, he was really good to start out with, and then he just kind of, I don't know, I don't really know what happened. I think there were some extracurriculars that maybe got in the way, and he just couldn't really put his nose down at work, and it was affecting his work, and it was affecting my name. I'm getting phone calls, bad phone calls, the kind of phone calls you don't want to get, and I just got to the point where I couldn't take it anymore. I had to let him go. I gave him multiple chances, multiple customers, and he couldn't. It was the same complaints from a bunch of different people that didn't even know each other. So I just had to let him go. And then when they approached me looking for more people, then when I started getting the guys and arranging how I was going to do it, I decided that I found the people. I knew most of them, and I just said, listen, I think it's going to work best for both of us. All of them wanted their own gig in the future anyway. So I said, start your own company, get a number company, subcontract. I'll pay you a very reasonable rate as a subcontractor. I'll provide the truck so you don't have that overhead right off the bat if you don't want it. Here's the cut and dry rate, no overtime, no nothing. They did their own WCB, their own taxes. I basically just supply the truck and the name and the work.
So you're kind of prepping these guys for becoming full on if they ever decide to do that, right? You're giving them a taste of it.
I'd say that's how it turned out for two of them so far. One of them ended up, it was a short tenure for the one fella. He ended up decided to get his own truck, so he went out and bought a new truck and went out on his own. And then the other gentleman ended up purchasing one of my trucks and is now off on his own as well.
So what was the primary reason? Sounds like you hired someone, it wasn't the right fit. Was there something that you said, if I'm going to have an employee versus a contractor, what was your primary reason for doing that?
I still don't know what the best route is. Like, there's advantages to both, I guess. Like, as an employee, I guess you'd probably pay them a little bit less than I do. Actually, I considerably less. I paid the employee that I had considerably less than I pay the contractors. But I also, paid him overtime. It was a lot more managing for an employee. A lot more
administrative.
Yeah, there's a lot of things that you have to. He can only work legally so many hours. Plus, I'm a federally registered company because I still take my truck to BC. So at that time, I hadn't figured out a way to work the other three trucks without having to do logbooks. Once you go federal, every truck in your fleet has to have a logbook, and I was on E-log, so put an E-log in his truck, and now he can only work X amount of hours, same as me, and then now I have to manage that. So like when I get audited, if he's not doing what he's supposed to be doing, which he wasn't,
falls back on you, right?
Yeah, like he gets hit at the scales or DOT pulls him over or whatever. Like he just wasn't doing his logbooks, wasn't doing his inspections. He was smacking out hours that he wasn't supposed to be. You're supposed to only do, what is it, 15 hours, I think, including your breaks is the max you can get away with provincially. At all the little ins and outs. There's also other things that I realized after I let him go. There was some reasoning to how that all went down, and I started thinking about it after. And there's certain situations where the employee might become responsible for, or the employer could become responsible for his employees' bad decisions, bad habits, I guess you want to say. And there's enough of that floating around that I didn't want to get caught having to deal with something like that.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah. So you think you find a higher caliber of people when you offer them more money, but comes with more responsibility. So you're kind of managing the risk. You're moving the risk away from yourself. You're trying to start a business is a difficult thing because once you scale up to a certain point, you need a bunch more people, right? In order to provide the same level of customer service or whatever to your customer, unless of course you only have one customer. By moving over to the contractors, you're paying them more, but you kind of set your expectations differently where you give them an opportunity, but they have more responsibility as well. They've got to take care of their own bookkeeping, their own WCB, like you said, their own insurance, right?
Yeah, I think they have more skin in the game at that point. Like it's worked out pretty good for me, especially with the one fellow I got right now. He's been with me for over a year now. He's been great, and like he does his like you said, taxes, everything is on him, and he's been doing that all himself. And I've been asking how it's going. He's like, yeah, good man, this and that, and the customer loves them. At that point, when they're ready to maybe like think about doing their own gig, then helping them set up with the truck and do this kind of thing, they're also establishing kind of a name for themselves as well. They're not just, oh, that's just another employee. This is so and so. He's been here for a long time. And then if he ever goes out on his own and, he's not really, I guess, taking anything away from me, like there's plenty of work to go around. So when he goes knocking on doors that he's gotten to open through working for me, then they'd be maybe more likely to be, yeah, like you want to come out here, if they will take you all day if you have your own truck. And he's got more of a name because then he's not just showing up in my truck, just not even really caring, just, oh, okay, well, if they don't like me, then he'll just send me to the next customer. These guys are kind of trying to set up the building blocks to start their own company and have their own customers too, so they don't really want to burn any bridges or make anybody upset or anything like that.
Do you have any kind of understanding? It sounds like you're pretty casual about who they go and work with, but do you have an understanding with him that that's your client, and even though he's a independent contractor, he works through you, your company presumably pays his company, and the client pays you. Do you ever have any concerns ever about him bypassing you? Like, you have a certain level of trust, but I've seen people do some pretty silly things.
I do not. Everybody's had their own experiences with that. I know that that's a situation that can happen. The way I have my customers worked out, there's a lot of work out there. Like there's a lot of work for that particular customer. I feel like, I don't know how to word this, Kevin. Not with that customer, to give you a short answer.
You mean you're not worried about that customer because you have a good relationship with that customer?
I think I have a great relationship with them. I feel like he's already there. So like if he quits and says, hey man, like I'm kind of ready to do my own thing, I'd be fine with that. It's whatever you want to do. And he's like, hey, do you mind if I approach them and maybe try to do some work for them? He's already there. They already like him. I could find a Joe Blow that nobody knows, try and do the exact same thing, and they might not like him anyway. So then they might just, for me, I try to keep a good relationship where everybody's kind of happy. Like if he leaves tomorrow, I probably won't replace him, to be honest with you. So for him to go there and go to work, I feel like I could call there, and if they have some big projects on some equipment that I'm familiar with and I'm good at, and that's what they call me for, I would still be there on the project anyway.
How many other mechanics work on that site or that with that client?
A lot.
Okay, got it.
Contract wise, I think a select few, a lot less than there used to be. They have a very select group now that they choose from and that are pretty much there all the time. Then they have some bigger projects they'll call in a little bit extra labor, and I try and fill in as much as I can there because I'm extremely busy with another customer, so it's really difficult to try and juggle. So on some of the great big projects, the bigger projects that I'm more familiar with, other than just the day-to-day overhauls and stuff, I'll go in on the bigger projects and try and help out as much as I can. If they give me some pretty good notice, which they're good about, they'll say, oh, we're bringing such and such unit down on, December 15th. Can you be here for 3 weeks? And I'll say yes or no. And usually it's jobs that they know that I'm good at and that they do need help with. So I'll try and make time for that and just let the other customer know, hey, man, you might have to find one of the extra guys that you call once in a while to maybe fill in for a few weeks, or just use the other contractor that works at that customer to bounce around a little more. But usually they're good about giving me the time off that I need to maybe rip out to the mine and help out with a big project. I don't know how to explain it really well. Like when it comes to like anybody that I've hired or had working for me, I've never been worried about them stealing work, to answer that question. It doesn't bother me to see somebody else go to the same customer, because I'm not scared that that customer is never going to call me again because this person went there.
And it seems like a very large client, not with just a few machines. So I still think, I mean, if it was me, I would make it clear with the person that, you know, this contract is through you and that's the understanding. And if they ever change the arrangement, you can talk about it at that point. But whatever, it's just my opinion. I would be a little bit hesitant to encourage that or be okay or suggest that I was okay with it. But that's just me, of course. But I'm wondering, what's the biggest reason that that client works with you? I mean, obviously they work with other people, but what do you think the top reason or two that they keep calling you?
Tough question. I don't want to give like a conceited answer. Like, I'm pretty familiar with a lot of gear that's on that particular site. When I was working for one of the dealers, I built a lot of the equipment that was on that site. I've been on that site since it started, whether it was as a dealer or as a contractor. There's a lot of people that are still there that I worked with over the years that I had a relationship with, and maybe and some of them might be in more supervisor roles. So I guess maybe there's a level of trust there. The equipment itself, there's certain pieces on the mine site that I'd like to think I'm pretty good at working on and familiar with.
You think there's big value there, and that's one thing that I've heard from a lot of mechanics is that, you know, once you have that kind of established understanding of what you're working on, you've been working on it for years. Like in this case, how long approximately? Like 5, 10 years?
That's a good question. I want to say, yeah, a good 10 years probably. I mean,
Wow.
probably 10 years, nine or 10 years. I think probably they've been operating for sure. Like the dealer thing's tricky too, because I think like they have a select base of people that are really good from the dealer. But when it comes to dealer support, I don't know if everybody gets what they might think they pay for, if that's a fair way of saying that.
Yeah, so it sounds like they're using a blend of the dealer people just because of their access to information and level of certain quality with certain repairs. Is that correct? They use a blend of between contractors and dealers?
Yeah, I think that's fair. Like, I think there's some contractors that have really good dealer experience that are now on their own. And I think that there's some customers that will utilize that, because I think whether they're cheaper or their experience is that much better than what they might be getting for support from the dealer today or what it is. I think there's some scenarios where both might be applicable. Like, you know, dealers have warranty and training and tech support, which, you know, I can't do anything with most of that. But when it comes to just general repair and service of the equipment, you might get a guy on certain projects that has never seen that type of equipment, and he's a dealer tech.
Yeah, that makes sense. You've been around longer and you know the whole history. If you take that client, it sounds like they use a blend of dealers and independent mechanics and people like yourself who've been around since the mine started. How many machines approximately do they have?
I'm going to say quite a few.
What's the biggest challenge that they face right now with their equipment repair? Like if they had a magic wand and they could solve one major problem, or if they could solve their biggest problem, what do you think they would do if they could do anything as it relates to equipment repair?
That customer, that's a good question. You know, I haven't spent much time there in the last, I guess, maybe 6 months. But like at previous times, I want to say one of the biggest ones would have been parts availability for sure. I don't think it's that way there right now. The last time I was there, it was way different than what I was used to from a manpower perspective. They had a lot more in-house manpower. When I was spending a little bit more time there, it was a lot was relied on surge labor from dealers and contractor support. So I don't know if they fixed that problem by hiring all these people. I think manpower was a problem for them for a while, but I want to say that they fixed it because they hired a bunch of people.
And you used the term surge. What was it?
Surge labor. So like I guess some companies will have like dedicated people that'll go to a site. They'll be like the dealer representative for service, you know, like mechanics or whatever, usually on a shift. And they're there generally all the time. And then for bigger projects or like let's say a major breakdown where they need to bring in like 4 or 5 guys, they'll send like just whatever they have available. So maybe it's 3 apprentices and a couple journeymen, or maybe it's 5 guys that have never ever seen a piece of mining gear in their life, or maybe it's five really good guys because they got a slow patch and they're looking to put people places. But that's generally what they call it. It was just, we have these guys available, and they just ship them out.
And so that still the surge pricing probably applies as well. We own equipment. We've been billed on a Friday for something that definitely wasn't urgent, but the dealer took it upon themselves to just stay. The overtime wasn't authorized, but I think the overtime ended up being $300 an hour, plus travel. One day I think they arrived at 2 o'clock, stayed till 7 or whatever, and it's probably a $2,000 bill, right? You mentioned at the beginning of the call the kind of fair billing practice. That's one thing I think that dealers are very good at is like, yeah, they get stuff done. Obviously, everyone's thinking about themselves. But in the end, if you get the problem fixed, that's cool. Like, I don't think anyone cares about paying a lot of money or, double time or whatever it may be if you solve the problem. But if you leave on a Friday night, come back on a Monday or whatever, you bill that portion of overtime, but nothing actually got fixed. That's a bit frustrating. Do you think that happens?
Yeah, maybe. I don't know, for one reason or another. I don't deal, like, I don't, even when I worked for the dealers, I never really got involved. Half the time I didn't even know what I was getting charged out at. Like, I didn't care. So like for me, I have an idea what dealer rates are, but not to say that if they're like, hey, we got these 10 guys just sitting there, if you take all of them, we'll give you a break. I don't know if that happens. That could happen. Like, I don't know what these guys are getting for rates when they bring guys in from dealers. I know what my rate is. I have a general idea what the base rate is for dealers, but I don't know what they get charged out at when they send extra guys out, or what the guys that are there all the time are getting charged out at. To a point, I do care because it does affect my rate, I guess, in one way. But on the flip side, like, I'm comfortable with what I have for the most part. So what everybody else is getting paid, that's what they're getting paid. That's what they got arranged. And it's that I try not to be like in a big competition about that.
Yeah, no, that's cool. Yeah. Some guys establish their rates based on, they always want to be lower than the average aggregate, dealers in their region. Others, it depends what they do. It doesn't matter what the dealer charges. They can charge whatever they want. Obviously, there's a point in which you want to charge a fair price and bill them properly, right? Bill them fairly.
Oh yeah, yeah. You gotta get what you're worth. But when it comes to, like, dealers are weird. One dealer for a logging company might charge $245 an hour. Then you got your overtime charges and your mileage costs and everything like that. But then when it comes to some of these bigger contracts for, let's say, like a mining customer with these guys are ordering godless amounts of parts every year. So I think the dealer can play with their rates a little bit more, perhaps. I'm not sure if that's how it is or not, but they might be considerably less, but they're charging out a lot more.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Parts. I know loggers in that area actually who have told me to get certain dealers to come to their yard to work on a skidder or a buncher or something. I mean, they're looking at like a $1,400, $1,500 bill before buddy even opens up his toolbox.
Wow, yeah.
Just for the fees and the rates and like even local guys in central Alberta. They got local people that live in town, their local dealer tax. And to have a guy like that come out for 8 hours is $1,300 bill. And it's like, it's just crazy to me. So like dealer rates are tricky, like just because the way that they play with them and different customers and different fields. You got mining, ag, all these different things, and everybody charges different from the dealers. And I based my rate off of what I can be comfortable at, and it's the same for everybody. And
choose the biggest dealer. Don't need to know the name. If you want to tell the brand, that's fine. How many other mechanics worked, whether it's in shop or mobile?
Oh man, like through the entire company or just that branch?
Just that branch, or branches within an hour if they had multiple within an hour drive.
They would have had dozens, like not even dozens, like they would have had different branches within the branch, if you will. So like there was like different departments. So like there would be like certain techs that would work on larger equipment, maybe that would work more on a mine site. The other branch was more responsible for your construction and forestry, which was less than an hour away. They had a rebuild shop as well. So like if you're considering the guys in the rebuild shop as well, then yeah, you're into the hundreds for sure. Just the one department, it went just the work skyrocketed. Like a bunch of equipment got bought by multiple customers and they just couldn't get enough guys. We had 2 shifts, and I want to say like it was like 28 people split We had this worked out once. I want to say it was around 28 people on both shifts. And at the end of it, it was well over 100 because they had to hire all these people just because they're still supporting the equipment they already have with maybe, people with more repair experience on that equipment. And then they would hire a bunch of people and they would all be on builds with a foreman and a charge hand kind of building equipment and putting things together. So like it was like almost overnight where they just went on a hiring spree because they had dozens and dozens of equipment that needed to get built. So these people were just all over the place. Like you wouldn't recognize anybody except for, you might be on a crew of 10 people doing something. You might recognize like one or two people.
Wow. And that's at one branch.
That was one department at one branch.
Wow. That is crazy. Now, if you had to guess in that one department or that one branch, how many different end user clients were they servicing and how big were those clients?
Wow, lots. I don't know. Like I wasn't really on the ins and the outs. Like there was probably dozens, but it was spread out at that time. It was spread out across the country. So just because that particular branch and that particular department of that branch serviced a very wide area, and I guess there were mines and stuff starting up all over the country that they needed to be building equipment at. So
What's the slowest point then? Presumably that was at a really high time in the economy. Things were booming. So at a slow point, they would still have a lot of mechanics, right?
yeah, I don't know. You never really heard much of like giant bouts of layoffs. Like there's other dealers that'll just hire a bunch of guys, and then 2-3 years later, it's the same dealer all the time. I'm sure anybody listening, especially in Alberta, will know who I'm talking about just by saying this. But like they'll hire a bunch of guys, and then 2-3 years later, there's just a big bout of layoffs. And then this particular company didn't do that much of that. Like people would quit and go to different jobs and stuff. But out of all those people they hired, like I don't know where they all ended up. Like I kind of did my own thing with that company at that time. I was doing a lot of running repairs, so I would go to mine sites and fix equipment and be responsible for like maintaining them and stuff. So um and then on my overtime, I would do like 3 and 1. So I was 2 and 2, 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off, and then I would always usually work a week of overtime. So on my week of overtime, I'd be going to a lot of these other places and helping with the builds or helping with major projects someplace else. So
That sounds like you were at one of the busiest spots on the planet.
the mine that I was at, like for the running repair, not so much. Like they had a lot of equipment at that mine site. It was a different site altogether.
I mean the company, I mean the dealer that was managing the equipment. A lot of the people I talk to, they work at dealers. Like it doesn't sound like there's that much going on. Maybe there is. Maybe they just don't have enough people.
It was pretty busy. It was a niche thing. Like mining is its own thing. Like, but then like you go to Fort McMurray and that's on a completely different scale. So like you can't compare it to that. But I guess if you're taking Fort Mac out of the equation, yeah, it was at one point it was like really, really crazy busy. Like I know friends of mine and stuff, they were going all over the place building stuff. And then like I said, I don't know where all these people really ended up because at the end of that, I ended up going to Northwest Territories for a while. I did a pretty big job up there. I built a few pieces of equipment. So that's a whole nother story. They were just really weird pieces of equipment. But anyways, at the end of that job, I spent almost 6 months up there. And at the end of it, I had saved up enough to buy my first service truck. So I bought my first truck just to run on days off. So I was running that on days off. And then I was still going and doing these odd jobs and running repair jobs for that company. So I never really got to see where everybody was going and what was all happening. Within 4 to 5 months of buying that truck, I ended up just leaving that dealer. And that's when I just ended up going out on my own completely.
What do you think the biggest reason is people move around? Like when you've got so much demand for mechanics, is it just money?
Like switching companies?
Yeah, exactly. You worked at one dealer, but there's a lot of competitors that could all use, mechanics. I think it's pretty clear there's a shortage of mechanics around.
I quit, which was kind of bananas, really. Like I was flat out, which is crazy. But before, like, I want to say, like, I wasn't responsible for hiring, but I would make a pretty good assumption that it was hard to find skilled talent at that time when they were trying to find all these people to put this stuff together and build stuff. And it was super busy. So, and everybody, all the other dealers are probably competing for the same people because I'm sure they were almost as busy at that time.
So, what's the top three reasons that someone would move to another dealer?
I guess everybody's got their own reasons. I had a few different reasons from all the different. I worked at three dealers through my apprenticeship and my career before I started my own business. And most of my reasoning for leaving was due to, yeah, there's a number of reasons. I bounced around between three dealers. So I worked at two of them twice. So I would leave one and I went to another place and then I came back or went to another dealer and then left there and went back to the first dealer that I worked at. And then I went to the third dealer that I worked at. And that's where I finished my career before I started my business. And there was a bunch of reasons why I ended up leaving places. Probably the top reason out of all of them was management changes. You'd get a good groove, a good group of people, things are going pretty good. And then there would be like a management change. Somebody might come in and want to make a name for themselves and make a whole bunch of changes to everything. Yeah, it didn't always go over that well. One of the other dealers I worked at did that. And there was a bunch of things that changed that, like, at the end of it, they had lost a whole bunch of field talent. Like, I think out of all those people, there's maybe 8 or 9 guys in service trucks. I think there's only one of those people that are still on a service truck at that company today. And at that time, there was six of us, I believe, that quit within 8 months.
Wow.
And not just like 6-month guys that had been there for 6 months or something like that. Like a few guys that had been there a year, 2 years, 3 years, but there's a couple guys 13, 14 years. I had been with that company cumulatively for, I want to say, 8 years.
Do you think that at some point, if one person quits, whatever, if two people quit, okay, if 3, 4, 5, 6, you lose, 80% of your mechanic staff. Do you think at some point a company actually realized that, oh, hey, I see a pattern here? Do you think they came to the realization that maybe they hired the wrong people to manage the place?
I think they realize that it's happening, but to be blunt, I just don't think they care. I remember when I was an apprentice at one particular dealer that I worked at, and the branch manager or the regional man, I can't even remember. He was way up there, and he legit had told somebody at that time that, like, mechanics, they're a dime a dozen.
Wow.
Like, they're just, to him, he could just go find another mechanic to do the exact same job as the guy that had worked there for 10 years that just quit could do. And I don't know if I agree with that, but that was his opinion. I don't think that was the case at this particular time where they, changed that management and all these field guys left. I don't think they cared. I do think that they thought they could just get more mechanics and train them the way they want them. Maybe that's what they thought.
You think there's a disconnect between the executives at, the people that hire those managers and the way the business, on the ground actually works?
Yes, I do. Very much so. I think that, and I think it's always going to be there. Like the very uppers, like the ones at the very top that you never see, you just see them in an email here and there. Those guys, there's a complete disconnect. Like they don't, yeah, to them, it's just numbers. It's a numbers game. As long as their numbers look fine, they don't really care what happens on the bottom. They don't, and right down to the customer, I think in some points, like, I think as long as their numbers are looking good, they don't really care even about what they're giving out for service to their customers. Like I want to say that they had market share in certain pieces of equipment for quite some time. They had amazing pieces of equipment, like great gear. It's renowned, like people loved it. And they slowly lost that after some of this happened, like with management changes and stuff and just the way it was operating, because they weren't providing a service for that equipment. It could be the best equipment in the world, but if you can't get somebody that can fix it in a timely manner, and if you can't supply parts for it, and if you don't have manpower available to go see it, skilled manpower, then the customer doesn't care. They need their equipment working, whether it's the fastest and the best and the strongest. If it's sitting because it's broken, it's useless to them. I think they lost part of that. I think there was competitors that started coming up in their technology to try and match what this brand was doing. And, that competitor, I think, started gaining more of the market share after some of this. This is just my personal opinion, but like I saw it as a contractor after when I started my own truck, I chased some of this gear to get going and just kind of blew my mind. The calls that I was getting from guys that I've never met in my life, but they heard my name from somebody else or this or that. And they would call me for repairs that when I was in the field working on that equipment it was pretty basic, pretty day to day, like nothing that you had. I really don't want to come across through this interview as like conceited or
No, no, man, it's just your opinion.
yeah, and that's basically what it is. It's just my opinion, so I take it for what it is. But I think they really dropped the ball. I think the guys in the uppers like that's one of the reasons why I really like doing things by myself now. Is like I don't answer to anybody. I don't have to deal with. I mean, I answer to the customer, but I don't have to deal with all the ins and the outs on how this guy wants it done or that guy wants it done, or you know, I can give the customer what I can and how I want to, and I don't have anybody telling me any different. So, and upper management in those big companies, I think it's made a big change in the last 10 years. It used to be you could go to a service manager and he would know your name. Some of these companies now, I don't think, maybe service manager level, they still do, some of them. But now I feel like it's so segregated top to bottom now that it's just a numbers game. It's not as much about people and about helping and building anything. They just want to see that bottom line at the end of it, and that's good enough.
I think it could be the result of a company getting to a certain size and getting acquired by, larger companies, whether they're larger public companies, they own multiple branches, or international companies. And like you said, they just look at the bottom line. As long as that bottom line is good, they don't really care, how it happens, right?
That could be. There's still differences. Like the last company I worked at, the one that you considered to be like really, really big, the one that I did mining work at, I'm not sure how their management is now. I can't speak to that. At the time that I left, it wasn't, there's others might disagree, but I had a good experience there with the management and kind of just for the most part with how things were done there. It was a lot better, but it was a lot bigger too. Like it was a massive company. So you would have thought it might be a little bit different that way. At the very upper levels, like the guys that are in charge of like an entire region or I don't even know what they would call it at that level in that company. But like, yeah, those guys wouldn't know the guys that are on the ground fixing stuff and building stuff. But for the most part, a lot of the uppers, they know a lot of the guys that were down still fixing stuff, and they knew who they could really send out to do this job or that job. They would still seem interested. They'd still say hi to you and talk to you. But there's other ones that changed quite a bit. The third dealer that I worked at, they were the same way. I left them for the same reasons. Big management change and just a lot of things just kind of, it was just getting done a lot differently. Whether it was right or wrong, I didn't enjoy it, so I left. So maybe there's other people that liked the way it was going and what was happening there. But
sounds like politics is a big thing. I mean, that's pretty common across industries, right? Across the world.
yeah,
From like kids sports to government organizations, but that's something that is unfortunate. It's a game in itself to like play the politics aspect of whatever position you're in or company you're working with, because everyone wants something to be their idea unless it's bad.
That's a fair way to say it. I never left a place, like if you want to go back to like why people leave, like I'm sure there's a lot of people leave for money. Like I've met a lot of guys that are like, oh, it's another $3 an hour, $4 an hour, whatever. I think the rates right now are on a dealer level are pretty comparable no matter where you're working, really. I don't know. I haven't been in that game for 5 years, so maybe I'm completely out to lunch. But if you want to go to like a site or something like that, if you want to leave a dealer and go to a site, lots of times I know lots of people do it for money. Like sites pay a lot of money. Maybe the work environment's a little bit different, double time instead of time and a half, more holidays, stuff like that. So there's a monetary value to some people there. When I was going through my apprenticeship and after that, when I became a journeyman and stuff, the rates weren't that much different, but people were generally about the same. You could go someplace else and make pretty much the same money. Working environment would be a big one, I guess, for some people. If you're working with people you can't get along with, or if you're working like I guess there's some places that I would not work because I know how they are. So I wouldn't even have to quit there because I just wouldn't work there because like I couldn't be on a shop environment with if you can only get 3 or 4 bolts put in on a giant piece of equipment because there's so many procedures to go through just to get to that point and the paperwork and all this. I couldn't deal with that. So I would quit that job if I ever had it for that reason.
Culture is another thing too, right? When you say that, the procedural company where it takes you 5 hours to prepare for your 8 hour job, your 8 hour shift, and you get 3 hours of work done, that client ends up paying it. I know I know a company that comes to mind right away. They're the same company that lays people off when things get tough, and then the CEO gets a bonus because he laid off 2,000 people.
I don't know about that culture and like the working environment. Like it's nice if there's a whole bunch of like-minded people that just kind of want to get the job done safely and have fun doing it. There's some things at some places that I think get in the way of that, and it makes it not as enjoyable. I guess if you, that's a good way to put it. There's things that are in place that make your job that much harder to get your job done, and everybody's grumpy about this or that because it's you have to do this in order to do that, and it's not always about just about like safety and stuff like that. There's just some places just got certain ways of having to do things a certain way, and I don't know, it makes it trickier to enjoy what you're doing. So you have to enjoy what you're doing and the people you're working with and the atmosphere. And I like what I'm doing now. It's most of my work is by myself, so I can do it my way. And the people I'm working with, like we all just want to get the job done, and you can put the stereo on and listen to music and crank away at getting things done, and makes it that much more fun. But
If the CEO comes to you one day, says, let's go for coffee, nobody else is listening, his question to you is, hey, we have a huge retention problem. I want to know every idea you have. What's the number one thing you would suggest aside from having competitive wages? What do you think changing one or maybe even two things would be a very good way to help retain employees, specifically mechanics?
I'm not sure. I don't know how I can answer that. There's a lot of different variables. Like taking money out of it, like there's everything from time off to scheduling to oh man, like I'm not sure how to answer that one, Kevin.
What do you think about being adaptable? Like, do they have different shifts that apply to different people? Like, you might. I know someone that used to work with us. They moved because they liked the shift better, whatever it was, 7 on and 4 off, whatever it was. Do you think that by being flexible with the company, not just one size fits all, do you think that would help as well to retain people?
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of companies that do that. I know there's a lot of different schedules that maybe weren't there a while ago, when I was still working for dealers and stuff. Like in some situations, there's the techs have a lot more say. Like I talked to a lot of guys that are like, oh, I can work this amount of days and then take this amount of days off. But I think it's still concrete. Like, but shifts, like there's a lot more shift work available. I think even at a local level, I'm hearing more guys that are working shift work where it used to just be 5 and 2. If now I hear of a lot more guys doing like a week on and week off, maybe 2 and 2 or 10 and 4 or something in the city, which that helps for a lot of people. I don't work a particular shift anymore myself. I can kind of make my own schedule, I guess. So for me, I wouldn't think about scheduling like for any customer. Like I have a different scenario as a contractor. I go to work because they need me and I work as much as I need to in certain scenarios, because they're my customer and they want me there to fix stuff. So, and then once you feel a guy out or get the job done, then you can go home and do what you got to do.
When you went on your own, what was the biggest fear you had about going on your own?
Not having enough work. When I quit, the reason I quit that time was because I was getting sent to a place I just didn't want to go on a schedule I didn't want to do. It was 3 weeks on, 3 weeks off, and it was kind of the only thing they really had for me at the time. And I just didn't really want that. And I was getting quite a bit of work on my service truck just on days off, but not enough to keep myself busy. I got a young family and stuff, and I wasn't really into that shift and that schedule. And it was kind of a take it or leave it. This is what it is scenario. And I didn't really like that. So I kind of said, well, I had one job. It was maybe a couple-day job lined up for a logging customer of mine. And I just drove into work and I said, I quit. And that's all I had lined up was that 2-day job. I was scared. It's like I was driving into work and like, crapping my pants because I'm like, I don't think this is kind of jumping the gun. Like maybe I'm being really impulsive. Maybe I should just do 3 weeks and try and line some stuff up on my 3 weeks off and then take this a little slower. But I had just gotten back from being up there and at a different place. But either way, I didn't want to be, I was just doing 43 and 12s up in the Arctic. And then was, I didn't want to do 21 and 21. Like, it was 21 days gone. It was just, it's too much. Like, I didn't like
Especially with
it.
a family, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
You kind of knew that you knew what your plan was. You would go away for 6 months, build up enough money, buy a service truck, because eventually you probably knew intuitively. I'm just assuming, but that you would be on your own. But it's that the whole process of getting there. So, how long from when you bought your service truck until when you were completely on your own?
6 months. I bought it in August, 6 or 7 months. I bought it in August, and then, like I said, I was doing it on my 2 weeks off. I was kind of tinkering on things here and there, buying a few tools with whatever cash I could get from the odd job here and there. And then I did one big job over Christmas that year. I actually left like Boxing Day morning because the customer called me and see if because he needed an undercarriage pounded out in like a week on a it was 903 or 953 buncher, and it was cold. It's right at Christmas, and I said, "Yeah, I'll do it." So I went. I think I got it done in 6 days or something, and that gave me enough, kind of like a little. It wasn't much, but it was just enough in the bank account so that when I went back to work after New Year's, that's when they started planning on wanting to send me where I didn't really want to go, and I just kind of said, "Well, I'll sit on what I made over Christmas if I get slow, and hopefully I can just pick up the odd job just to keep that topped off." And so I had the 2 day job plan when I went to quit. And then before I got home, I had gotten a new call from another customer in the area that needed some work done. So that lined me up for a little bit more. And I headed out that way. I got the first job done, and I was in the hotel one night, and another customer that I had worked for called me and asked me if I could work on one of his pieces of equipment. Like, just cold call me, heard that I was in the area and that I was on my own again. It's a small world, man. Like, some of these customers you get into, like, they talk at the coffee shops or the gas station or whatever. So I ended up getting like 8 days worth of work right off the bat, like the day after I quit.
How did you feel? You were at the hotel, you got that call. Did you feel that dopamine hit of like, wow, it's working. This is great.
Oh yeah, yeah. No, I felt really good. Like, I remember calling my wife and telling her, and I thought it was the coolest thing. Like, oh, I got another day of work. Just a day. It was just like, oh yeah, another day of work. It was great. So then, yeah, I got 8 days out of that stint, and then I think I came home for a couple of days. And another gentleman called me, another one from that same dealer that I worked for. I can't remember how he got my phone number. If I posted something on their Facebook page, just letting them know that I had my own truck or something. I ended up working for him, and he had a family member that had a big operation, a big logging operation. And before you knew it, I was working for his family member again, who I had worked for before for that dealer as well. And I spent the whole rest of the winter working for him, which that was super cool. So, and that held me off through into the springtime. And then springtime kind of slowed down, and that was the first time I had to drop cards off, and I rolled around. I think I went to like 4 or 5 places, dropped off some cards, and I went for lunch with a friend of mine that had apprenticed me at that particular dealer equipment. When I was at that dealer, it's just tough. I worked for 3 dealers. One of them was big on construction and forestry. So one of the guys that apprenticed me, I still keep in really good touch with him, and I called him and went for lunch with him while I was dropping off cards. And the first card that I dropped off just with the secretary, because the guy I needed to talk to wasn't there, and it's one of those ones where, oh yeah, okay, so those guys aren't ever going to call me because that card's never going to get where it needs to go, kind of things. Like, I'm the kind of guy, like, if I need to talk to somebody, I want to talk to that person. I don't want to talk to his receptionist or secretary or
Gatekeeper.
just whoever stops me off the way. Yeah, that's right. I was like, oh, okay, they're never going to call me. He called me within 2 hours. He'd gotten back to the shop and needed some work. So, and that's the customer that I'm currently busy with. That's 4.5 years ago. And yeah, he called me just to ask me, he's like, so how busy? They couldn't find anybody. You couldn't find contractors, couldn't find employees. And he's like, can you put a cylinder on a 650 size excavator? And I was like, yeah.
Wow.
That's
just for reference. You're talking about 2020, August 2020, you bought the truck. Is that correct? And so that's a sketchy time, right? So, that whole feeling of like uncertainty played into how you felt going on your own right in the beginning of some crazy pandemic, right?
I was like, yeah, it's kind of bananas, like right in the middle of an epidemic. There's a lot of people out of work because of the epidemic. People slowed down and stuff. And here I started my own company. And I didn't even think about that until that person asked me that. Like people were still cutting logs. People were still, I farm on the side. So like the farm didn't slow down and loggers didn't slow down. So I was busy enough. It was crazy because I was so busy that I never even really noticed.
And presumably you do not watch the news.
Oh, I was watching the news like all the time. Like, because when we were in camp, when I started the truck and I bought the truck, it was always on the news, like at camp.
What's the key benefits of being on your own? One word answers.
Freedom.
Cool.
How many answers do you want?
As many as you can think of. There's no right answer or wrong answer.
Like adventure,
Okay.
I
Yeah.
guess. Because I could choose where I go. So like, somebody calls me in there, or if the customer tells me I'm going here or there, like it's adventurous. I still get to. It's not the same place for the same dealer for the same customer. I get to
What
bounce
about
around.
money?
Money is definitely there for sure. Yeah, there's advantages, right? So like it's not all sunshine and rainbows, that's for sure. Like I would say there's certain monetary advantages to having your own business, but at the same time there's a lot of monetary risk and stuff involved too. Like I got overhead, there's some guys run their businesses a little bit different, but when I got overhead, there's bills I got to pay at the end of the day too. And money comes in and then money goes right back out. I got a guy I got to pay, whether the customer pays me or not. That guy's got to get paid. So yeah, there's risks too, but money definitely plays a factor for sure. Freedom's got to be the biggest one.
Yeah, no, that's cool. It's obviously when you make more money, there's more responsibility. Like you said, there's more people that rely on you. There's, customers that maybe don't pay you for a while. But do you ever see guys that go out on their own that totally thought it was going to be different, and maybe because they aren't as responsible as you are in managing the business?
No,
Like misconceptions people have, mechanics are like, "Oh, I'm going to go on my own and it's going to be great." And it's like, "Oh, I didn't think about that. Oh, I didn't think about that. I didn't think about that."
no, I think for the most part, like everybody that I've met that's got their own business and their own truck and they're doing the same kind of thing that I'm doing. I think everybody, for the most part, kind of had an idea what they were getting into. Like even myself, there were some surprises here and there, I'm sure, but for the most part, I had talked to a few people, had their own trucks, were doing their own thing. I kind of had an idea what to expect. There was a lot of things that you have to learn yourself, but as for like, the general basics of having your own truck and starting it up, there wasn't too many surprises right off the bat. And I haven't met too many that's failed either. Like I think everybody that I've met that has their own gig has been doing good with it or has done it for a long time and they're still doing it.
What's the biggest challenge that you face in the management of your business, not the wrenching element?
For the most part, I think I got it figured out. I used to be way better, like right off the bat. Like my daily, I guess at that time I just called them invoices because I just had these blank staples invoices that I used to write everything out on. I didn't know what else to do. And then I kind of started getting into printing companies and getting my own. And then now I just use PDFs, but I was way better back then. Nowadays, I'm horrible about my notes. I try to get at least my daily notes done and stuff, but I'm sure my wife, she has to bug me a lot more. On my paperwork stuff, I'm not so. I just like going and getting the job done. Then I either forget or don't want to just write everything out. That's the hardest part for me. That's always been a problem. Even when I was at the dealer, I hated doing paperwork, but you only get paid by doing the paperwork, so I still got to do it. From a management standpoint, that's the worst for me. The truck sucks when it breaks down. It's not broken right now, but I'm doing some maintenance to it right now. And it sucks to have it down because then you got the downtime. I don't mind really working on that either and making it the way I want it to be and being the guy. I'm the guy that's fixing it. So I know what needs to be done or what actually got done, instead of bringing it to a place and saying I need something done and they either do half of it or I don't know. I got trust issues with some of that stuff, so I don't like taking stuff places if I don't have to.
So you're saying, is it safe to, just to clarify, that accounting or bookkeeping, that element of it is probably your least favorite part of the business? And if you could,
Yeah.
okay. I think that's very common.
Yeah. I don't know too many. Yeah, I don't know too many guys that are really like big on that paperwork, that side of it. A lot of the guys, they're really hands on, like fixing stuff, like being out. And I think I wouldn't say everybody struggles or isn't good at it, or, but I'd like to think that a lot of the guys that I think about that I've worked with contracting are kind of more or less like me, where maybe it's not their favorite thing in the world.
You've got a lot of stuff going on. You got a farming gig as well. Mechanic work isn't your primary source of revenue. I mean, I don't know any farmers that are wealthy, but I'm curious, like, how much does farming, is that a hobby? Is that something you grew up with?
I'm kind of dipping my toes into it. I did grow up with it. I grew up on a farm. My dad and my uncle farmed together. I've gotten involved a little bit. Kind of dipping my toes in, seeing how involved I want to get with it. They're eventually going to get old enough that they want to retire and not really do it anymore either. And I don't know. It's more of, I guess you could call it more of a legacy farm. You know, that I would be, man, I don't know, fourth or fifth generation if I was to ever decide to take the farm over. So
What kind of farm?
right now it's just a mixed grain farm. I grew up. My dad had cattle. I never got into the cattle. I never wanted to, so I never got involved with that. My dad actually just got rid of his cows himself this year. He's 64, so he just got rid of his cows this year, which was almost a surprise. But I didn't want to deal with the cows, so it's just grain. Yeah, we just got combine and a tractor and about, I think we farm just over 2,000 acres between the three of us.
Have you seen technology impact the farming, is specifically the farming that you do?
Oh yeah.
For good and for bad? Is it both good and bad, or mostly good?
Nah, I'd say mostly good. Like you're always going to have technology. There's going to be glitches with technology that maybe, you know, you got to work out the bugs and make things work better as new technologies progress and come out. But oh, it's changed quite a bit. Like I remember the tractors and the combines that my dad used to take me on when I was a kid, and the stuff we have now is just like our combine. I think has like 14 computers all multiplexed together right now. It's crazy.
Wow. You've got these multi-generational farms. Like, what do you think the biggest challenge they face right now in staying alive and thriving? Or is that a whole other podcast?
Yeah, it's. I think everybody's probably got their own issues to like get past that. Like there's, it's probably regional too. Like I'd say, you know, like land prices are crazy. So if you don't already have a bunch of land, that's going to be hard. Equipment prices are going just like everything else, you know, just like vehicles. Things are just really expensive now. A brand new combine now is just it's nuts. I think they're up to like over $1 million just for the combine, and then you're probably like another, I don't know what the heck it is, 500, 600 grand for the header. So you're $1.5 million for a brand new combine. I think
That's a
now.
farm.
Yeah, yeah, but I mean, you know, land prices in my area are crazy too. It was like, you know, really good land close to highways or close to villages and towns and stuff. You're $1 million a quarter, which is it's crazy. But it's, you know, if it doesn't even make it to market and it's already bought.
Wow.
So the really big farms, the really big corporate outfits and stuff, they'll buy that up as fast as it comes
Wow.
available. So it's competitive. The family farm, it makes it difficult for the family farm, I think, because not everybody's got that amount of cash flow to just go up and scoop land up. Like
Is there a
that
model
stuff.
for renting out if you've got 1.6, for example, whether you do or someone else does, 1.6 million invested in a combine, is there any way of, I assume that this is not, you know, a genius idea, but I assume they rent it out to other farmers to help pay for the cost?
Oh no. Well, I mean, maybe there's guys that do that. I don't know anybody that does. No, maybe there are people that do that. I can't speak for that, but no, that's usually
Wow.
just like you have a piece of equipment that gets used from 4 to 8 weeks a year or something like that, and then otherwise it just sits
So the
around.
utilization, but that's mainly for seed. Is there any way, like, if you were tasked with getting that, if your family said, "Hey, we got to get this thing going. We need to generate more revenue from it. Can we get it working for another 8 weeks?" And assuming you put your own operator on it, right? You don't let some random person run a machine that complex, right? Is there a model for that, do you think?
There's probably people that do that. You know, maybe once their land is off, then they'll go help their neighbors for a price.
Yeah.
Maybe. I can't think of any specific examples of that happening, at least where I'm at, really. There's people that do. I think that's bigger down south, and especially in the States, like custom harvesting and stuff is a big thing. But I think for the most part, everybody kind of just does their own thing around here. And we've helped out neighbors, and we've had neighbors help us. You know, they finish, and then next thing you know, there's another combine in the field because the neighbor just showed up to come and help out. And then maybe next year it's the other way around. There's that kind of stuff happens. I don't know so much about farming the equipment out for revenue or not.
What is your plan for your own business? What is your your outlook for the next couple years, specifically to, your mechanic business?
I'm pretty comfy at the place I'm at with it. If anything, maybe the fellow that's working for me decides one day that he wants to do his own thing, which is cool. At that point, I'd probably just stay by myself and keep as many people happy as I can. And just, I got a really good base of customers right now. I don't have to chase work. My customers are great. I think I got a good relationship with them. I think there's a fair amount of work, and I don't think that's going away anytime soon. So I think keep things going the way they are. I don't see myself ramping up again with a bunch of, it would have to be it would have to just be like a fairy tale of a scenario between having just the perfect contractors to work for me and the perfect customer environment with work and everything, the amount of work, steady work. Like, I don't see myself ramping up unless it's for something that's almost too good to be true.
Having been there before with multiple people, do you find that it's a totally different game when you've got 3 or 4 people running 4 trucks? Like running one service truck, you've got that figured out. You're in your comfort zone right now, right?
Yeah. I was pretty fortunate. Like, even when I had the 3 guys, that particular customer, they were really good with the guys that they had on site. So they got to know them. They would, for the most part, know the people that were on site. So for the most part, my guys kind of almost took care of themselves. Like, they got on a shift or they got on projects that they knew they were doing. They knew their schedule, other than bad things happening, like, truck issues or things that were out of the normal, just the normal day to day. I didn't really have to deal with too much of it. The scheduling, everything was it was already in place. So
Sounds pretty good.
it was, and it still is. Like, that's kind of how it is right now as well. So I was fortunate that way. If I was to get into that fairy tale environment, you're still going to run into the hiccups with, like, oh, this truck blew an engine, or I need 12 spare tires on site because we keep blowing tires, or you'd have to manage a lot of that kind of stuff. Like, probably more, I would probably have more things to deal with just with the trucks. The guys at work, um, that stuff for the most part kind of takes care of itself in a way. But the trucks would probably be the wild card. You're running these trucks pretty steady and not the best environment. They need to get serviced, they need to get fixed, they're going to break down. What happens when they break down? The guy still has to be there, still needs to do his job. Do I have spare trucks? Do I rent a truck? Stuff like that. The truck, that'd be the catalyst probably in that scenario.
So what advice do you have for someone who's considering going on their own? They've got the experience, they've got their 5 or 10 years at the dealer, and they're really thinking about going on their own. What's the best advice that you could give based on what you've learned?
Oh, that's a good question. Another contractor that I worked for, he's a welder actually, but he told me something funny a little while ago, how he was told when he was starting out not to ever take his foot off the gas. And I've thought about that quite a bit since he's told me that, because I almost feel like I'm, like downshifting right now, because I don't want all the things that I had at one point. But when you're starting out, I think that's a really good way to look at it, because you got to kind of really push at the start. Like, I didn't say no to anything. Like, if somebody called me for whatever, like, it's stuff that I'd never even seen in my life, never worked on. I had the manuals. I went out and got a good laptop right off the bat, and that helped me out a lot. That would probably be the first thing that I would get if I was starting out on my own, was to get a good computer. So I had plenty of manuals. I wouldn't refuse work. I went and chased it as hard as I could right off the bat. Recently, I wouldn't say I've slowed down, but I've gotten set up with really good customers that treat me very well, and they keep me busy, so I don't have to chase, the piecework as much, like the 2 3 day jobs here, and then fly out here for another guy and do a 2 3 day job there. Like for the most part, I got customers where they got enough work for me that I basically show up and get told what I'm doing and where I'm going. And starting out, you really got to push though, because you kind of got to get a name out there and get guys calling you and keep people happy. Because otherwise, it is a small world, at least out here. I don't know how it is like down in BC, like lower mainland and stuff. I'd say the north is probably more like this, but it's just a lot of the markets that I chase for what I do for work is pretty small. So if you're saying no all the time, or if you're not doing very good work and stuff like that, that gets around. So I would make sure you do a good job and you get as much work as you possibly can for as long as you can when you start out.
And eventually choose your customers carefully, eventually, right?
Yeah, I was fortunate with that too. Like I've never had an issue with customers really. Everybody I've worked for has been really good. They've always paid. I've never ever chased a dime.
You're very lucky. Very lucky.
I've heard horror stories. I know, Kevin. I've thought about it, and like people ask me that all the time, other mechanics and stuff, and I've never had to chase. I've waited a bit from people that I know. I'm not going to have a problem with them. I've waited, but I've never chased. So that's been really good. Customer wise, I've always had really good customers. They've treated me really good. For the most part, I've never had a I wouldn't say I've really had a really negative experience where I'm like, I'm never going to that guy again. Like he's horrible. There's nobody on my entire list of people that I've ever invoiced that I've ever said that
Wow,
about.
that's really cool. What advice would you have for a young person who's considering becoming a heavy equipment mechanic? They're not really sure if they should.
I haven't been asked that. No, I do know like some young kids and stuff, like just through like family friends or whatever that are considering it. For a young guy, the biggest thing for me was that I got on with I had 3 dealers that I worked for that were all, I might add my issues with the management and all that and blah blah blah, but the dealer level experience that I got and the equipment that I was working on, I gained quite a bit from that. To start my own truck and not have the experience that I had from those places that I worked before, there's no way I would have been able to do it.
I didn't ask, did you go to trade school before you got your first dealer job?
No, no. I got on my first dealer. I was actually in air cadets when I was a kid, and there was my first boss that I worked for, my first supervisor. He came out to like a couple excursions and stuff that we did. He ran into me. I was working at Walmart, just changing oil. Just a punk kid, like 17, didn't have a clue about anything, just bumming around and working at Walmart. And he came through the automotive till one day because there's no lineups, and he saw me working there, and got to talking. He's like, "Well, what are you doing here?" I was like, "I don't know, I'm just working." And it was late spring, and I was in grade 12, and he kind of said like, "Hey man, well, when you're done school, like, why don't you come by the shop, drop off a resume, and like maybe we can get you on doing some stuff around the yard or start an apprenticeship or do something." He started talking about getting a different job as a mechanic maybe, and I said, "Okay, well, yeah, whatever." And I'm just a kid. I kind of thought about it, and I ended up doing that. I went to his shop. I think I dropped off a resume on a Thursday or a Friday. I had one or two more final exams, and I wrote my last exam. And the next day, I was already starting at that dealer, which was, I got lucky just because I knew him and he got me a job. It was a busy time in the industry, and yeah, so that worked out good for me that way. I don't know how it is for young guys getting on right now. I think it's tough for first years right now, trying to, or even people with no experience. I don't think anybody wants to hire that or take that on right now. I think there's kind of a lull in the market. I think it's kind of, I wouldn't call it, I don't know if it's a recession or not, but I feel like everybody's looking for experience, but nobody wants to take on the buck of, hiring somebody and training them.
It might be a loyalty thing. I think that's common everywhere. I think it's very difficult. I think knowing the right people helps as well. And again, getting out there too, because we got guys that I talk to, younger guys that, are in trade school. And if you build it, they won't come. You got to go after trade school, like if you're good, you're going to get a job anyway because the trade school will probably place you with someone. But I think it's a relatively easy thing to get into. I'm curious, have you ever in your career, have you ever seen someone get into the industry that wasn't a young kid? They turned their first wrench at, in their 20s and they loved it because what they did before wasn't fulfilling or whatever. Do you ever see late entrants, if I could call them that?
Yeah, I've seen it. I can't think of any particular examples. I'm pretty sure that I know one guy that I went to high school with. He's a couple years younger than me, I think. But I want to say something that I just saw something on Facebook about him just like doing some stuff in his first year of his apprenticeship, and he's in his 30s now. So, and I want to say he did some other trades before that. So it does happen for sure. I know a lot of people that do dual tickets. I've known a lot of welders that have become mechanics. One dealer that I worked in particular actually used to, I'd almost say like they'd incentivize that. Like they used to pay you your full rate in whatever ticket you had and then let you apprentice as another trade. So like if you were a welder, you could get your full rate as a welder and start it and be a first year mechanic, wrenching as a mechanic, but getting paid as a journeyman welder. And it was cool, right? Like you could be an electrician and go be a welder, or you could be a mechanic and go be an electrician. Like it was pretty neat. But going back to what you said about loyalty, I think that's what screwed that up. Is there was a bunch of people that went and got their extra ticket, got it paid for. The schooling at that time was paid for. You got paid to go to school, plus you're getting paid a journeyman rate, yet you're apprenticing in another trade. And then they would get their second ticket and, off to Fort Mac or off to the next best thing with their new ticket, for more money or whatever reasons. And then I think that company got sick and tired of training people and losing them after they got their second ticket. So I also know people since that happened who went right back down to a first year rate just to get their second ticket, which is pretty determined. I don't know if I'd be able to drop down to first year rate to do another ticket. It'd be cool to have another one, but I don't know if I'd want to take a pay cut like that. So yeah, I know a few people, they were older in life and decided to do the mechanic trade.
Loyalty is for sure a two-way street. Finding a company with a good culture in a place where you can continue learning as much as you want to learn, I think that's the key. Obviously, when you get big corporations that lay people off to make their bottom line look good, that's not very loyal, I don't think. So I think it's a two-way street. I totally see it from the company side too. It's like you train people, you apprentice them, and they get an offer for $1 an hour more. And actually, you probably would have just matched it, but they don't really recognize the value in the knowledge that they're gaining. It's kind of it's a tough thing. It's a really tough thing.
Yeah, I can see it from a company perspective. I got laid off once in 08, 09 when it kind of the market receded. I'd imagine they didn't really have a choice. And I was an apprentice at the time. So there's value there. But when you got journeyman guys that you're trying to hold on to just to keep things going through that time, like I guess you can't afford to really have that apprentice. If that never would have happened to me, I might not be doing what I'm doing right now. I can't hate on anybody for doing that. The ones that do it consistently and just hire when they need to work and then lay them off when that job ends or project ends, that kind of stuff isn't really cool. But the guys that go out and get a company to invest the kind of money to dual ticket you and then leave can make more money because now you got two tickets, or now you got another ticket that you think you like more after another company just invested all that time and money into you. That's not really cool either. So
Yeah, man. Wow. Thank you for your time. I don't know if there's any other any questions that you have for anyone that if you watch the channel at all, or if anyone on the channel.
I kind of want to just ask you, like, how did Tekamo get going?
Tekamo started out of desperation, I guess. We actually still have a company called Rent One. Had our own fleet. Started in 2010. Started with one machine. We were buying a lot of new equipment from Brant, and so as our fleet grew, it wasn't very viable to continue going to the dealer to paying dealer rates to maintain it. So we had worked with some contractors. Actually, Keith on our channel, Keith was our first mechanic that was outside the dealer. He was never an employee of ours. He always had his own thing. But Keith was a guy that was doing a lot of our stuff. It was very hard at that time, 2010, 2011, 2012, whatever. It was hard to find people. I think Tekamo, we started filming 6 years ago, but we had been working before that. And our goal was to inspire the next generation, to attract people to the industry. It was so hard for us to find people, and the people we did find, because we ended up hiring people as employees to run our own service truck. And that didn't work out well for whatever reason. And part of it was our lack of understanding. I'm not a mechanic. Everything I know is from owning equipment. Yeah, so our goal then became, okay, let's show people how to service equipment, show what mechanics do, in their day-to-day. So we did some how-to videos and started following guys around and truck tours and all that stuff. One thing we thought early on, and I mean like pretty much near the beginning of the channel, is to create a network of independent heavy equipment mechanics. That was, I got to say, that's always the kind of been the plan. A lot of what inspired us in the beginning in the rental industry, actually, we didn't even want to own our equipment. We wanted to build the Expedia of the rental business. It all started when I had my own project that I was doing. I was renting equipment. A few months later, I'd spent 15 grand on renting equipment. And then while I was on the project, I was trying to find different types of equipment. And I was on probably my BlackBerry at that time. And I was like, man, this is hard to find. The internet is, it's 2010. The internet's been long, it's quite popular, not going anywhere. I just found it really hard to find equipment for rent. So I thought, wow, if we build an Expedia, make it sound so easy, build the Expedia of the rental industry, aggregating existing rental companies, making a single website that will show all of their equipment for rent, where it is. So basically finding the closest equipment for the best price to wherever your project is, wherever it is in North America. That was our plan originally. And then, anyways, that's a long story. With Tekamo, this was probably, I don't know, 8 years later, 6 years later from that. Our plans changed with that. We attempted to build that Expedia site for the rental industry. We wasted a lot of money, but then we started building up our own fleet, owning our own equipment. And then we thought, hey, mechanics are hard to find. Why don't we try and connect mechanics with equipment owners? I mean, mainly to solve our own problem. We always thought big. We always thought really big, like nothing just regional, right? Now we have about just under 1,000 heavy equipment mechanics across North America. Granted, they're not all the same, and they have varying experience levels, mostly heavy equipment and ag, mining. And we're trying to create a system that is easy to connect qualified equipment owners to the right mechanics in their region. And so we are very slowly building that. We have a new model that, there again, we've been talking about for 6 years, that we're starting in Texas. Our US division, Tekamo USA, is actually based out of San Antonio. We have someone down there that moved from Vancouver. He's living down there. We've worked with him for 12 years. He's a partner in that company as well. The US is really where it's at for us. That's a really big focus. One thing just alone, like what we want to be able to do in having all these mechanics, is find OEMs that don't have service in certain areas. And as a result, they lose business because they don't have support. I mean, that even happens with Komatsu, in certain regions, like in California, for example. Komatsu, I personally think they're great machines. They have a bad reputation because it's very difficult to get your Komatsu serviced because there's no support network in that region, to be specific. And so that's a manufacturer that has a great reputation in other places. So what we want to do is be able to go to manufacturers that may not even have a presence in North America. When you go to Bauma in Germany, you go to Con Expo in Las Vegas, you see the equipment world is massive. It is massive is an understatement. And so what we want to be able to do is, and what we're building towards this, is a manufacturer that has very good equipment. You talked about that manufacturer in our conversation earlier. You said they had excellent equipment. Things were going great. And then their serviceability kind of went downhill. That was a result of, management making changes at the dealer level. And though the equipment is great, if it can't be maintained and you don't have parts availability, what's the point, right? And so that will eventually tarnish the reputation. So what we want to do is go to people who have a good reputation in the equipment world globally, but they have no dealer support in any state or region, or maybe even in the country. Maybe on like a rock crusher, for example, there's a big market for them, but the market is dominated by the major players that have been in the US or in the region for, 50 years, right? Or 20 years or whatever it is. So it's very hard for them to enter. So
Yeah.
without them having to create a bunch of infrastructure, what we want to do is leverage our network of mechanics and be able to offer a certain level of, quality of service to these companies. Maybe it's just in one region. Maybe it's in Virginia or, North Carolina or wherever, Texas, certain regions where we have good coverage. We have good mechanics in that area. And if something happens, whether it's maintenance contracts, warranty repair, we can send our qualified mechanics who are, to be clear, contractors out to fix that equipment. So then now they can say, hey, we not only have support in Texas, but we actually have support all across North America. And we work with a company called Tekamo, and they have a network of 1,000 plus or whatever it is at that time mechanics. There again, not all of which we would send out necessarily to any given job, but we want to have a certain level of quality, and both in agriculture, mining, construction. And so that's kind of our model. We also have a model of creating the first shared workspace for independent mechanics that want quality shop space, like dealer quality shop space, but that don't have the money. And so what we want to do is we're going to be building, that's a concept we're working on now. We're going to be building in Texas. And we already have people who are potentially going to be working out of the facility. And then you have the facility, you've got a bunch of independent contractors working there. Obviously, I'm making it sound very easy. There's a lot of things to consider. And then once we have a facility, we can then, offer, OEM quality repairs at, independent contractor rates. That's the plan. That in a nutshell. So sorry for the long explanation, but
No, that's great. Yeah, no, that's super cool idea. I've thought about that before, like if you just had like a group of people, like you got like unions, for example. You got like the local whatever branch. I'm not a big union guy, but you got this local branch with all these mechanics, and they can choose, to send guys here and there. I don't really know exactly how it works, but something like that where you got a group of people. I've thought about that, where if you just had like this network of people together that can do work like that, like that's super cool that you're doing something like that, because I think it's neat. I think you guys are gonna have, like, I'm not gonna lie, like there's got to be some
oh,
hurdles
huge,
there. I'm sure you
huge.
guys have
Yeah,
to struggle
yeah.
with, like, your response to that. I'm sure in some ways maybe you get the odd guy or the odd company that's maybe a little more open, but I know the dealers that I've worked for and stuff like that, like that's got to be like a real struggle to try and figure out how you would get around just how they deal with things, whether it comes to warranty or training, or taking work from the dealer, or whatever, like however you want to word
There's
that.
so
But
much work out there. And it sounds like based on our conversation, your region, I guess it would be cyclical in the sense of it gets really busy when the economy is booming and resources are booming. But in your, it's pretty stable, I guess, linear. It's not like, I don't know, I could be totally off, but in other regions, I talk to people all the time, and if you have millions of dollars of equipment and you have to wait 3 weeks and pay full dealer rate and still not get your stuff fixed, so you're getting charged a lot of money and you have to wait a long time. There's a huge shortage of people in this industry. There's a huge shortage. Maybe not in your area, but it's huge. So for us, like, I think we can do it cheaper, better, quicker. Maybe not better, right? But the better aspect of what we're going to do is, like, I think a relationship with the client at whatever size. If you're dealing with the equipment manager of a construction company that has a fleet of 50, or a farmer who has 2 machines, if you can establish a personal relationship, like you said at the mine, You worked at the dealer. You knew that piece of equipment for 10 years. You know their fleet. You know it well. There's huge value in that because sometimes equipment behaves a certain way that is like having a backstory on it is pretty valuable, right? It could save you $100,000 easily just having the backstory.
Yeah, for
So the
sure.
connection between the equipment owners and the people doing the work, both from a billing perspective, like, hey, if you got a question about your bill, oh, this is why that happened. Oh, cool, thanks, yeah. Like, there's so many levels at the dealer level of the bill going through, so much administration. I understand it's a complicated business, and I'm not knocking the dealers. I mean, there's good stuff they do, there's bad stuff they do, whatever it is, it's business, right? But that's one thing we want to provide dealer quality access to tools that you would otherwise not, be able to buy because they're too expensive. Track presses, diagnostic equipment, expensive stuff. But also what we want to do is help these independent mechanics to however much they want to know. We want to help them build their business and teach them things and learn from them. Obviously build our own business. If we can provide value that way, resources, if they want to hire people or whatever they want to do, access to lines of tools and parts and all that, that's all in our plans. We want to help mechanics to grow in whatever way they want to grow. Eventually, we may have staff, employee mechanics. I don't know, but our focus now is on contractors and helping to provide them tools to be able to do jobs that they're used to doing while working at the dealers, while billing fairly to the end user, to the clients, both for parts and for service. And then what will happen is once we establish that in certain regions, we're going to get some pretty big clients that see us as a viable alternative to the dealers. Because, right now maybe they don't trust any independents because there's a lot to screw up, right? That's what will happen too. So these mechanic facilities that we're setting up, which we will have lots of them, we plan on being, a big company, and we're not going to be beholden to a brand. We can work with any brands. So if a brand comes to us from Europe and says, hey, we'll give you this big contract, but you can't work with them, we'll be sorry. I don't know the future, so I don't know specifically, but we will work with every brand. We'll help people fix their equipment for a fair price, help them learn about equipment, film what we do, which is kind of what we do now. So there's a lot to what we're doing. It's very complicated what we're doing. The YouTube channel is one element of it. It's very expensive to keep the channel going. So, but we have big dreams. We've been in the equipment business for 15 years, and we've been in Tekamo. I think it's been 8 and 6 with the channel. I could be wrong. Don't quote me there. I'm really bad with dates and timelines, but we know what we're building. We have an amazing team. The people that put the channel together are incredible. Every single one of them, they're amazing. They love what we're doing. They know we're building something big, and it wouldn't be what it is without them. So I'm super fortunate. I'm just one piece of the puzzle, but we're building something big, and hopefully guys like you, or people getting into the industry, equipment owners, everyone can benefit from it. It's a huge industry. I love this industry. I love heavy equipment. Construction projects. Mining is something we're also getting into now, as far as if filming with mining. If there's any mines out there that want us to go and film and feature mechanics and stuff like that, we would love to. We will go anywhere in the world to film mines. Right now, they're so secretive about what they do because of, obviously, you don't want, they're under so much scrutiny too, right? For everything they do. I mean, mining
Yeah.
is a huge part. It's foundation of our whole global economy. It's pretty critical. And I think that the mining industry has failed to attract people to come into it. That's a huge thing. That's going to affect everyone. And so we would love to, if you know any people that work in mines that want us to film, obviously we're not just going to randomly film stuff. It's going to be, we want to make videos that that inspire people to get into it. It's a very interesting business. I mean, you must love what you do. Otherwise you wouldn't do it, right?
Yeah,
So
for sure.
I could probably talk for another 8 hours about what we're doing with Tekamo, but it's super exciting. It's fun. It's very challenging. If you ever need to buy parts, talk to Josh. Anytime we make part sales, it helps the channel. It helps what we're doing. Any profit that we make goes right back. It goes into the channel. Like probably 120% of what we do goes into the channel, whether you can see it or not. It's quite expensive to do, and we're competitive as well with pricing. So we started Fortis HD actually a long time ago. That's another podcast in itself. How we got started there, mainly selling rubber tracks, but the parts world is something that is also good. We're not a dealer, so we have more access. There's certain OEMs that restrict dealers to selling certain lines, or whether they're aftermarket or not. That's going to be more restrictive. There's franchise agreements or dealer agreements that restrict dealers from selling outside of their service area, whether it's their state or province. We're not subject to any of that. We appreciate the dealer model. The bricks and mortar is a huge part, and we're actually going to be integrating the bricks and mortar element. We're not just online. We actually can help dealers sell some of their slow moving stuff. So you've got a dealer that's been around for 50 years in the Midwest, and they've got a final drive that's been sitting on the shelf for 3 years. We can put it on our website through our network and help sell it. Obviously, there's MarketBook and those other websites that already do that, but we kind of have a hybrid model too of integrating existing dealers that hold inventory. So we're not anti-dealer by any means. We want to make it accessible for mechanics and equipment owners to get stuff done.
That's pretty cool. You guys are pretty ambitious, Kevin. That's pretty neat. The yeah, dealers. I don't have nothing like against dealers either. You know, like I'm doing my own thing. Dealers, it's just they have such a weird thing and way of doing things these days. I feel like I don't know. When I first started, the environment was different, and now it's so corporate. It'd be cool to see people work together a little bit more on some things. Like sometimes it's just really hard to find parts or like you say mechanics, like anything. And it seems like just because you got this brand behind you that you know there's things that are limiting companies to actually providing service to the people that they're supposed to be providing service to. You know, you spend $1 million on a piece of equipment, there's stuff that's holding the company back, whether it's voluntary or not, from helping those people get their equipment up and going again. You know, like it's if there's something that you can do to get it working and keep the customer happy to buy another piece of equipment off you, then you should be doing that. And it'd be nice to have a way to connect everybody and just make things work a little bit smoother that way. I've known people that have had to look for parts and stuff like that part thing is the coolest idea because there's stuff that you can't find sometimes nowadays, and it very well could just be sitting on somebody's shelf in the middle of nowhere and you would never know it, and they can't get rid of it. So that's a super cool idea. I like
And
that one, Kevin.
we're not
That's
against
great.
dealers either,
Yeah.
right? Like we see, like, I learn about the dealer model all the time. I've been buying from dealers for 15 years. I've been very frustrated by dealers.
Yeah.
It's a business, and I appreciate them for, for the business that they do. I would be willing to help a dealer any day. This industry is so huge. I don't want a monopoly. I would gladly, if any dealer managers or employees are listening or watch the channel and want to have a discussion, I would help them improve their business. One thing I'd say is you talk to your mechanics more often, because they actually are a wealth of knowledge, and there's so many things that are happening on a daily basis that you're just so layered by like protection of. I have no idea how to explain that. There's people that are always trying to protect their jobs, and they're moderating certain things that get through. Like, man, there's so much knowledge that if management, any management, like, I don't understand. I don't own a dealer, and so I don't understand. But from what I understand, there's little things that are easy to solve that would probably help you retain your mechanics and your people in general. It's so siloed, the information, for one reason or another. Then And I understand why, from a business perspective. Like, you don't want to give people access to information because then they'll fix it themselves. That's been the mindset for forever. But there's something called the internet, and it isn't going away. But I also think that dealers, man, dealers, some of them, they're so corporate and they're so huge that they don't really care. They can afford to make billion-dollar mistakes and really whatever. It's $1 billion. Like, they're multinational companies. It's not a big deal. So, when do they start caring? At what size? But there's any company can improve what they're doing. I think taking a customer for granted is crazy. Like, that's insane. You have good clients that are loyal to you, that have bought equipment from you for like 30 years, and you do stuff that, man, if they knew that, it's like, but it's just such a big game. And when you're so big, you can afford to make these mistakes. Like, if we made mistakes like that as a small company, we'd be bankrupt 30 times over, right?
Yeah.
So, but I would love
Yeah, for sure.
to be open and just transparent about stuff to improve the whole situation for everyone. And I don't care if I help my dealer competitor. The industry is big enough for everyone. The industry is big enough. You could probably, I don't say double, but there's a lot more people that can come into it and have a good life and make good money and build the company to however big they want. But it's that mindset is scarce in this industry. I think they're very closed minded, and maybe not all of them, but just this from my past 15 years of experiencing the dealer mindset.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I agree, Kevin,
But
for sure.
man, Tyler, thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it. I know you're a busy guy. Hopefully people
No, for
will
sure.
gain knowledge from this and insight about what you do, what they could do. I'm sure I could talk with you for another 8 hours, but hopefully maybe we'll follow it up if there's any other stuff. People listening want to leave comments or feedback or have questions. It would be great to hear from people. I know it's something that we're just starting out. But this podcast will likely be around. It could outlive us. Hopefully, you live a very long life, but hopefully, people gain value from listening to this stuff. So cool, man.
Okay.
Thanks, Tyler.
Great, Kevin. Then I look forward to hearing it. And,
Okay, man.
We'll go
Take
from
care.
there.
Thank you very
Thanks
much.
very much.
Okay, see ya. Bye bye.
Yes, you too. Take care. Bye.
Tyler's story reminds us why we do what we do, celebrating the hard work that drives our industries forward. If you liked this episode, hit that subscribe button. When you need tools and tracks, be sure to visit fortushd.com. Your support not only gets you high quality tools, but it also funds this podcast. Thanks for being part of the journey. See you next time.